Thorpe Hall could be described as a grand pile on the edge of Louth. But the word pile has a special meaning when it comes to Thorpe Hall, and here's why. The story begins in London. St Paul's Cathedral is without doubt Sir Christopher Wren's greatest masterpiece. Next to his mausoleum in the crypt, you'll find the words, "If you seek my monument, look around you." But little do the hordes of tourists who flock to St Paul's realise that part of Sir Christopher Wren's architectural legacy could also be found in the charming little market town of Louth, nestling in the Lincolnshire Wolds. How this came to be is a fascinating story that involves a 7th century saint, a terrible disaster, a world-famous architect, an eccentric Victorian cleric, and generations of some of the more downright dodgy townspeople of Louth. The story begins with the Great Fire of London of 1666. The capital lies in charred, smoking ruins. As well as designing St Paul's, Wren is also charged with designing a church that lies in the shadow of the great cathedral, in a narrow little street called Poultry. The church is completed in 1676 and is dedicated to St Mildred. St Mildred was the daughter of a king of Kent, born in the year 660, who later became an abbess and one of England's most beloved Anglo-Saxon saints. Today, a plaque is all that remains of St Mildred's on the Poultry, just a stone's throw from the Bank of England. Sadly, it gets little notice from the city high flyers and financial wheeler dealers who walk past it every day. But back in 1872, it became big news when the church commissioners decided to have the Church of St Mildred's in the Poultry demolished. This attracted the attention of one Reverend John Lewis Fitch of Thorpe Hall in Louth, and when he heard about the demolished Sir Christopher Wren church, he decided to buy it, lock, stock and pulpit. He then had the lot shipped down the Thames, up the east coast, and along the Louth Navigation Canal to the riverhead. From here, it was transported through the town by a fleet of horse-drawn carts, and, it has to be said, past a bewildered townsfolk. Finally, it arrived here, its final resting ground, in Thorpe Hall, and here the remains are today, or rather, what remains of them. Presumably, the Reverend Fitch's idea was to rebuild the church, giving him his very own Sir Christopher Wren church to worship in, here in Louth. But for whatever reason, reassembling this giant ecclesiastical jigsaw puzzle proved too difficult, and the dream died. For years, the pile of remains lay in an unholy heap, gathering weeds and moss and very strange looks from the local townspeople who wandered over on Sunday afternoons to gawp at it. They dubbed it Fitch's Folly. Now, the good Reverend Fitch may have been a devout man of God, but he was certainly no businessman. In 1885 he was declared bankrupt, and Thorpe Hall and all its contents was put up for sale. The local firm, Masons, handled the auction, and the only lot that didn't fall under the hammer was the mildewed remains of St Mildred's. Not knowing what to do with this redundant pile of marbly masonry, different owners down the years decided to put it to good secular use and use it to spruce the place up a bit. They've been used to build terraces, stairs, pathways, and add the odd architectural feature. They even form the rather ground terrace that surrounds the hall's swimming pool. probably not what the great architect had in mind when he designed his church in the first place. The more light-fingered townspeople of Louth got in on the act too, and over the years they've been guilty of pilfering from the pile for their own private building purposes. So it's highly likely that today Louth is literally littered with bits of original Wren architecture. The evidence is hidden in garden walls, porches, patios, driveways, and all sorts of patched up building repairs scattered across the town. For years, amateur architectural detectives, including four-legged ones, have been trying to track them down, but without success. But maybe, like the truth, they are out there. So if you live in Louth and have noticed an odd bit of masonry in a wall or windowsill in your home, or if you're a visitor and walking round the town and have spotted a bit of a building that looks like it shouldn't be there, well, perhaps you've discovered a lost piece of St. Mildred's. What Sir Chris would have to say about this somewhat cavalier use of his high-minded architecture, no one can say. But perhaps his epitaph in St. Paul's needs to be rewritten to say, "If you seek my monument, look around you. But don't forget to pop up and have a look at Louth."